Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the storm brewing amongst Tory MPs and wonder whether Keir Starmer and Labour would just be better off leaving the pressure off Truss and keeping it on the Tory party in general. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So for much of Starmer's leadership of Labour, his focus was essentially on Boris Johnson and his suitability or otherwise to govern. As soon as it became clear that Johnson was definitely on his way out, about 2 months before he formally made the announcement, Starmer shifted away from a focus on Johnson to the wider Tory party standing by his behaviour, basically. This was important because there's always a danger if you focus all of your pressure on the party leader. When they go, their party will dump the blame for everything on them in order to give the new leader a clean slate. You know, you do this 6 months from a general election and a sensible leader will have no dirt on them and give themselves a decent crack at winning the election. The reason I said for so long that it was so important for Johnson to go well ahead of the election is because Labour would need time to work on the new leader, because that's what the Tories would do. Perfectly sensible strategy. Blame as much as you can on the previous administration in order to give the new leader that sort of benefit of the doubt amongst the public. So Labour would need time to expose them to the public as no better than the last one and make sure that the voting public have turned on them by the time the election rolls around. Well, that's out the window now, because Liz Truss has collapsed public confidence in her government without Keir Starmer basically having to do or say very much at all. In fact, let's go back a bit and consider the situation this summer. I kept saying that I was getting the distinct impression that of the two main leadership contenders, Labour would prefer Sunak to win than Truss. Not only was he less insane, but he'd already broken his reputation with the public. He was the Chancellor who raised taxes to the highest level since just after the Second World War, but at the same time as creating the conditions for a recession. If he became Prime Minister, he would have no option but to own the economic mess. Whereas Liz Truss can blame the hand dealt to her by Sunak's economic handling. Sunak has no such escape route. The other thing in Truss's favour was that much of the public didn't really know much about her. Yes, she's been in cabinet for years, but because she's so crap at interviews, previous leaders have avoided letting her do the media rounds too often. So her public profile was actually relatively low. This was a good thing because it meant she wasn't as tainted by previous government failure and she was free to craft her own narrative. The public were open to giving her more of a chance than Sunak, about whom many had already made up their minds. This meant Labour would need longer to break her down than Rishi Sunak. Now, don't get me wrong, I also made it clear that she was so monumentally awful that it wouldn't be a difficult job for Labour at all to deal with her, but it was considered trickier than with Sunak. Well, if Labour did prefer Sunak during the summer, because a lot of the groundwork had already been done in their minds, I think they'll have changed their minds now. With Labour wanting to maximise their electoral appeal, I don't think you could name any credible Tory leader who is of much of an asset to the Labour Party as Liz Truss. You know, I talked about her latest interview earlier today. Put it this way, Michael Gove was interviewed afterwards, and of the two of them, he was not the one who sounded like he was as high as a kite. So then I got to thinking, should Starmer not bother with as much of a focus on Truss and just keep it on the wider Tory party? After all, one of two things is going to happen regarding Truss. One, the Tories will get rid of her, in which case Labour needs to not allow the wider Tory party to get away with absolving the replacement of all blame. Or second, they'll keep Truss, in which case Labour don't need to trip her up because she does it herself. And it's quite easy to make sure the spotlight is on the wider Tory party now. Take the issue of this mini-budget. There are reports of up to 70 Tory MPs prepared to vote against it unless the top tax band cut at least is removed. That is more than enough MPs to sink the bill. Oh, it's gone. If 70 Tory MPs vote against it, it's finished. Basically, Truss has to make changes. She can't face down a rebellion that size. But she's going to give it a try. Jake Berry, the party chair, he was being interviewed on Sky, I think it was, and he said that any Tory MPs voting against the budget will have the whip removed. This is playing straight into Labour's hands, because if the government make this threat to MPs, and it sounds like they already have, they've announced it publicly, and those MPs still vote it down, Truss has got two options. One, follow through on the threat and remove the whip. What, from 50 Tory MPs? Congratulations, she now has no majority in Parliament. Unless she restores the whip. And if she does restore the whip, it'll be an admission of defeat. Second, she cannot withdraw the whip from all of them. She might remove it from perceived ringleaders, but that still means the others get away with it and there's nothing to stop them doing it again. And if the ringleaders are people like Michael Gove, who aren't that bothered about remaining an MP beyond this Parliament anyway, it has no power. The government will look like it's not only at war with their own party, but that they are completely toothless in that battle. An absolute gift to Labour. But let's say the threat works. There is a very good chance the threat could work, in actual fact. Let's say that most of the rebellion melts away under the threat of losing the whip, which would exclude them from standing as Conservative candidates in the next election if that whip remains withdrawn. Well, that suits Labour as well. The reason these rebels are threatening to sink the bill isn't just because they don't like the idea of taxes only helping the rich. They do. They do. It's not because they don't like Truss. It's because they can see the political damage being done. If they are cowed and they vote through this unpopular budget, it will further harden public opinion against the Tories. And not just Truss's government. People will have seen reports of Tory MPs preparing to vote against the bill. Then they'll see, oh, hang on a minute, when it turned out they actually voted for it. Labour will point this out. Labour will say that Truss and Kwarteng may have come up with the policies, but the vast majority of Tory MPs supported it. Sure, those MPs may be telling their constituents that, this is not a good idea, I don't support this. Well, you're voting for it. There's no bad outcome for Labour here. There are times when the party leadership has to enforce discipline, of course, and threaten the whip, and a budget is absolutely one of those cases normally. But budgets don't normally contradict your manifesto promises. This one does. So Tory MPs are absolutely justified in voting against it. This is a monumentally stupid move by the government. What they should be doing is changing the budget in line with what their backbenchers will accept. And it's why I'm thinking that Starmer should just basically ignore Liz Truss and probably just make his attacks against the Tories in general, even PMQs. Just ask Truss the questions, but basically put the spotlight on the wider party rather than the government specifically. Truss is no threat to him in the election. He doesn't have to expose her unsuitability because she does that herself in every interview she takes part in. Do you know what Labour have done after that car crash of an interview this morning? They've put out another video. And all it is Liz Truss and Michael Gove talking in that interview this morning. That's Labour's video. That's their publicity. They're using the Tories in their own publicity. You know, I've even seen GB News presenters attacking Truss after today's interviews. These were the ones aggressively defending her over the past week. But she's shat the bed so badly that no amount of Febreze can cover it up. And bringing Tory party chair Jake Berry back, he had words of comfort for people struggling with the energy bills. Energy bills have just gone up quite a lot recently. In fact, basically this weekend. You know what he said to help people out? You know, there's people that need help. He straight up said in that interview this morning, people have got a choice. They know they've got a choice when these energy bills arrive. They can either cut their consumption or get a better income. He said that. And more than that, he said that this was the approach the government was taking. So he's not just saying this is his own personal view. This is officially the government's approach. Because it hasn't been contradicted. The number 10 haven't come out and said, no, that's not the government approach. Until that happens, that's the official government approach because the Tory party chair has stated it. That's the level of callous disregard that this government is based on now. This is child's play for Labour. If Truss is still Prime Minister come the general election campaign, the TV debates are going to be an absolute breeze for Starmer. In my opinion, the main threat to Labour right now is that the Tories get rid of Truss. And if that's the case, why bother piling the pressure on Truss only to let her take it all away with her when she's forced out? And you get the impression she probably is going to go. In fact, it will have taken longer for Boris Johnson to have fallen than for Liz Truss's government to have stood from start to finish. So you do get the feeling that any real attacks landing on Truss are probably a waste of time for Labour. That being said, I still think it makes more sense for Tory MPs to force Kwarteng to carry the can first. Way less damaging to sack the Chancellor and give the leader another chance. But that's great, just extends the whole sorry process, makes it even more important that Labour make sure that the wider party are held responsible. So they can't just replace her with a more appealing replacement too close to the election. Make it clear, we don't have a presidential system here. We have a parliamentary system. Liz Truss doesn't have the power to do anything unless her MPs vote for it. That wants to be the line, I think. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.